Checking code. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. That's like a 50%. You can be better than that. Come on. Thank you, that's better. Good. Lovely to see you all today. The International Journalism Week has started. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, put your hands together. That's good. Feel free to put your hands together. Thank you very much for being here. So it's really lovely to see all of you here today. We had a very beautiful session in the morning. Some of you were there, where we had a creative media workshop, and that was really interesting. So we're going to begin with the check-in code as usual. Yes, you're going to be checking in for IJW as well. So the check-in code is BFEORU. BFEORU. The check-in code. Please do check in. If you have any problems checking in, please let me know. I can show it to you if you want. BFEORU. Let me just go somewhere and say, if you can. Yeah, I'll just try to save it up there somewhere. We'll just go with this one. Is there anyone who hasn't got a check-in code? BFEORU, that's the check-in code. So thanks to all those just coming in now. We're just checking in, and we're going to start very soon. Our first session, don't worry, as we go along, we'll give you the check-in code again. Oh, all right. Our first session today is going to be the opening remarks. We have our head of school, the head of school of journalism, media and communications and information, Briony. Birdi, let's put our hands together for her. Yeah, we're going to invite her now to start with an opening remark.
Well, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the light mic working? Good. Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, I'm Briony, I'm head of the school, and I just wanted to welcome you all. Very, very warm welcome to IJW. For all our participants in the room and online, and all the staff and students who helped to develop and bring us all together for this fantastic week of events. JMC is obviously hosting this event, and it's fantastic that so many of you are here and have made the effort to join and are aware of what you're going to get from this. It takes place over 4 really packed days. The programme that has been put together is just brilliant. And apparently I'm told that this year is attended by 176 students from JMC. And the students are part of this event, this week, this series of events. And it provides you with a fantastic opportunity to hear from and engage with those who understand what journalism is like on the ground. And to discuss these issues and gain different perspectives on some of the most challenging professional situations that we can imagine, and certainly I imagine most of these situations. Of course, we also welcome the many professional media experts who are joining us from or representing locations around the world. And it really is around the world. It's including, as you will hopefully know from looking at the programme, Asia, America, Africa, Europe. And the speakers include journalists, veteran journalists, and experts from related fields who will share with us their knowledge and experience of the coverage of war, examines different forms of investigative journalism, so a really important and wide range of topics. Also participating in and attending the events are academic and professional staff, the university's creative media team, who some of you have been working with this morning, and then colleagues from around the place, essentially. So, an event as complex as this requires a huge amount of organisation, and you can find the full list of members of the organising committee on the International Journalism Week webpage. But particular thanks are due to my JMC colleagues, Bina and Ilya, who are the main organisers of this week, and thanks also to the list of 20 other academic and professional staff who have put so much time and effort into organising this week. So, onto the topic itself. The theme for this year is journalism in times of global unrest. And my word, we have some global unrest at the moment. I'm sure that everyone in the room knows that November 2nd, just 2 days ago, was declared by the UN General Assembly as the International Day to End Impunity for crimes against journalists, because of the increasing amount of abuse against journalists and the failure to hold the culprits accountable. And again, everyone attending and participating in this week of events understands the vital role that journalism plays in society. And of course, this is particularly important at of regional and national wars, international wars, political and civil unrest on a national and global scale, and violent protests, of course. And the programme across these really complex situations and asking some really key questions. So what are the challenges faced by journalists in times of global unrest? Can journalism thrive in such a challenging context? What should journalists know and do to stay safe whilst carrying out their work in times of global unrest? So, as a non-journalist, these are the kind of questions that I've always been very interested in. But for you, as students in this area, you are actually about this and engaging with this as a very real topic in the context which you will find out much more about here. So please do engage with the events and activities as much as you can. The keynote address will be given on Thursday by Jackie Harrison, the UNESCO Chair on Media Freedom, Journalism Safety and the issue of impunity. So there's no one more relevant to this year's topic to speak on that. So after this introduction, our session will continue with my colleagues Leah, Lindsay, Polly and the Creative Media team, who will present the shortlisted work for the creative media competitions, and then there will be a panel discussion looking at the fascinating and incredibly topical subject of election coverage in France, the UK and the US. So yeah, you could not be more topical with your choice of material. Very quick housekeeping point, we're not anticipating any fire alarm tests. We'll know what the fire alarm sounded, but if you hear an alarm, just follow the fire exit signs to leave the venues. And whoever is leading each session will provide help on site as well. Have you shared the hashtag? Has that been shared around? Yeah, so the X hashtag for this week is just hashtag IJW2024. And also the social media in relation to that. Some sessions will be shared on social media, some cannot for security reasons, which I know you will understand. So announce to that at the start of those sessions to let you know. So I hope you all enjoy your week. Thank you for listening to me, but now you need to get on to something interesting. So thank you all very much.
Right, thank you so much. And it is very correctly we've mentioned that students are at the heart of this week, and as part of this week, as you may know, we have creative competition contest, and I have invited everyone to submit your works since September, and received incredible production, which I will show now. But first, I'd like to invite the shortlisted candidates. So, Gabrielle, can you, Maki, Simin, and Bin, would you please stand up and please join us here as panelists? Can, Maki, Simin, Bin.
Come on, let's continue to encourage them.
Thank you guys for submitting your works. So we are going to organize it in the following way. First, play your clips. I will play the podcast that was submitted. And after that, we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Myself and our colleagues hopefully will join. So let's start with videos first.
Correspondents are often the only reliable source of information from conflict zones for global audiences and a lifeline for local civilians facing danger, all to be reporting directly from the front lines. Today's war journalists bring first-hand stories from all conflict areas. And Robert Kappa said, if your pictures aren't good enough, in the line of duty, 2023 alone, 3 journalists were killed, and the trend continues. During the first months of the recent Israeli-Palestinian conflict, 48 journalists lost their lives. A shocking statistic that later U.S. military journals comment. Journalists have been killed in these 30 days, many other conflicts over the last 30 years. In fact, the casualty rate for war correspondent is indeed getting higher. During the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 1970s, 63 journalists lost their lives. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, within just the first 2 years of conflict in the 1990s, 68 journalists were killed. Until October of this year, the number of journalists killed in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict had reached 143, more than double of the 68 killed during the entirely of World War II. Under international law, journalists should be protected by all warring parties. Most countries have signed the Vozhdaeva Conventions, which state that journalists entirely in war zones without engaging in combat are to be treated as civilians and respected as such. This is why we see reporters wearing the blue flag jacket marked press, a sign meant to protect them from harm. In today's wars, journalists face more severe threats, as advanced weaponry blurs the line between front lines and exposed safe zones. They are not only at risk of accidental injury, but are also often targets of deliberate attacks. Terrorist organizations have even weaponized attacks on journalists to gain global attention. In the extremist group, Islamic State released a video of beheading of James Floyd, shocking the world. In 2018, another Islamic State killed 9 journalists in Kabul, Afghanistan. In 2022, nearly 17% of journalists killed in war zones were targeted. In addition to these dangers, the arrest and detention of war correspondents is becoming increasingly common. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, More than 300 journalists were imprisoned worldwide in 2023. Many of these tensions took place in conflict zones, where it's tightly controlled. In Gaza, for instance, the Israeli military acknowledged the journalists' casualties, but argued these were due to accidental injury. Despite the ongoing efforts of NGOs, accountability remains rare. In the 2014 not a single journalist's death led to persecution. World Correspondent don't just record history, their reporting shapes how the world understands conflict. Their courage ensures that forgotten stories are heard, but it often comes at higher price. National law offers some protections. The reality is that more and more journalists are losing their lives fulfilling their duty. The question remains, who will listen to uncover the truth for us? When the price of truth is who will continue to risk everything to bring the stories to light? If they can no longer tell these crucial stories, who will speak for those who have no voice? As Cortado said, let's stand up together for journalists, for truth, and for justice.
So that was the submission by Shani. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very short in numbers.
At this time of global unrest, as a Japanese journalist, what can I do here in Sheffield? Join the protest in Western Park? Write graffiti on a building? Maybe not. I want to introduce a film distributor in Japan. K48 has distributed 4 films related to Gaza since October 7th last year. The latest one is I Shall Not Hate, a documentary about a doctor who has been trying to bridge Palestine and Israel.
Palestinian refugee who was born, raised and lived in Japan.
אין רופא שמתאבד וחולים ישראלים, ככה עושים, באמת, זה מה שעושים, זה שלום.
Dr. Abilesh's home was shelled twice by Israeli tanks. His 3 daughters were killed.
Even though his 3 daughters were killed, he still believes in peace. He needs to take action.
To transform this tragedy into a positive manner for him and for others.
Kent arranged Dr. Aberesh's trip to Japan last month.
It's time for the Japanese people to take action, to be aware, to speak out, to engage through organizations, and to advocate for justice and to expose what is happening, not just to watch it, but to speak about it and to say it should be stopped and to speak to their government.
Dr. Aberesh's story touched many and widely covered by the media.
The reaction of the Japanese people were unimaginable. After watching I Shall Hate and after listening to Dr. Abilesh's message, lots of people started to cry and of course started to ask what can we do.
So why is Kenji so passionate? His journey began in 1999 when he first visited Gaza and met a 13-year-old boy. The boy told Kenji that his aunt had been killed in front of him when he was just 4 years old.
The boy I met in Gaza, he said, I'm going to hate, I'm going to revenge, I'm going to kill as many Israeli people as possible.
Kenji noted that Dr. Aberesh's experience was similar to that of the boy, but Dr. Aberesh came to a different conclusion.
When I learned, I was so amazed at the possibility of, pursuing peace or even experience such a tragedy.
Kenji never stops. He organizes the event for the Peace Day, September 21st, in Japan as well. He said he believes in the power of the film.
Even though we live far from conflict zones, what can we do to promote peace?
Yeah, it's a very good question. But if you know, geographically, we talk about somewhere far away from Japan, far away from London. But think about it, it's a small world.
Even a small thing such as watching films related to conflicts in the world and sharing them with your family or friends will matter. For me, a Japanese journalist now in Sheffield, is to make this 5-minute video.
So I want people to feel, it's not that far. It's a matter of yourself as well. You need to do something to stop.
The darkness will never be forever. The light has to come. I will never lose hope.
That was speech by Monica. Thank you so much. And our next speaker.
Hello everyone, my name is Yu. My discipline is Global Journalism, School of Journalism, Media and Communication in Sheffield. I'm writing an essay now. I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I still don't know how to write it. Hi, Yu. I'm Yu in 4 years. Let's talk about your essay topic. Maybe I can help you. What's the working ecology like for journalism during the COVID-19 pandemic? During the COVID-19 pandemic, journalists faced the daunting task of gathering and disseminating accurate information. Parole 2021 claimed that journalists played a crucial role in sharing vital information with the public, especially during public health crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, journalists and news organizations operate within a unique community ecology. While they service as resources, we are also facing personal challenges. A data journalist interviewed in 2020 emphasized the importance of journalists promoting truth, critical thinking, and connecting people with resources to stay healthy during the pandemic. Apart from the coverage of crisis and disaster, what else is covered more? Well, it seemed to me that there has been a lot of heroism in the news during the COVID-19 pandemic. As 2020 points out, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the media have repeatedly praised healthcare workers for their heroic work. Although this gratitude is undoubtedly appreciated by many, we must be cautious about overuse of the term hero in such discussions, because such language can have potentially negative consequences. But they are really great, aren't they? They have to take much higher risks than usual when they work, and they have to endure physical and the pain of the deaths of patients and colleagues. It's not surprising to call them heroes like that. However, COS 2020 states that the overuse of the concept of heroism in the media can also have a negative psychological impact on healthcare workers themselves, as it implies that all health workers must be heroes. As the name suggests, we are not obligated to go beyond our original work behavior. You say you are from the future. So, can you talk about how will COVID-19 affect journalism in the future? In my opinion, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation of news media. Many news media have increased investment in digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data, virtual reality to improve the efficiency and quality of news reporting. In response to the economic pressure brought about by the pandemic, news media have begun to explore their diversified sources of revenue, such as hosting online events, developing apps, and providing paid content. Thanks for your answer. I know what I'm supposed to write. Then, please wake up and finish your essays. Bye. What a magical day.
Thank you.
Because I love Jesus. I love any man who can get nailed for 3 days straight and come back for more.
The beloved husband, father, and religious leader was shot while spreading the word of God Wednesday night.
In a world where headlines grabbed the public's attention and opinions spread quicker than facts, one particular group finds themselves in the midst of it all. Christians can be painted as hypocrites and judgmental people.
Is this the truth, or is this what the media wants you to believe? On this journey, I'll be delving deep into the authentic side of Christianity.
According to Good Faith Media, there are more than 2.6 billion Christians in the world. The popularity of this faith could make big organisations in the industry think they can get away with taking swipes at Christianity more easily. And so far, this has been a disappointing truth.
The way that our society is kind of less Christian kind of way of life means that people feel a lot more able to criticise it and make fun of it. But sometimes it strikes me the way that people just go about it, really.
With shows like The Gentleman, where they reinforce a hypocritical and inaccurate representation of people in this faith. Persecution is common, but not just in film and television, but also songs and posts on social media.
Get people who probably just push stereotypes, so, Christians hate people and God hates everyone, and there's also a lot of music out there that doesn't portray the right things about Christianity and the Bible and stuff.
So you see the different attitudes, like someone can make a whole film, get it budgeted, and spend on something that is so offensive to Christians.
Stated by Open Door US in 2023, 4,098 Christians were murdered because of what they believe in. Hate isn't only just portrayed, but also on a daily basis in Christian lives.
Following your religion surely shouldn't cause problems to arise in sectors of your life. Unfortunately, this is becoming more common over the years, with the younger audiences being afraid to share and open up about their faith.
I think, everyone will have their opinions, and I completely respect that, and not everyone will understand Christianity like someone who's been in it for years of their life, but I think a lot of people do just put things out, whether it's music, whether it's any social media, everything. People just put things out without thinking. It doesn't really aid people, and I think if you're going to put something out about a religion, which is quite a big part of someone's faith, be educated on it, do research. You don't have to know everything about it, but at least, and also don't hate on other religions. I don't see why people should be doing that, and not like making fun of them type of thing.
Yeah, I think because obviously we're in such a diverse world where literally like hundreds of different religions and different people who have no religion, who have different like spiritual beliefs, right? People just don't believe in anything.
A report which was published recorded that there has been a 44% rise in anti-Christian hate crimes last year.
I've had situations where people either aren't unchristian and they assume a certain view. Now, it won't be views are going to be what the Bible says, but it doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean that I think that you're this great sinner and I'm so perfect. It doesn't mean any of that. The thing is that people are angry at you or don't like you because of a misconception they have. One guy, he was like a gay icon kind of vibe, and I did have Instagram. I would post my beliefs on there and like Bible verses and stuff. He just told me straight away.
Having faith and that relationship with Jesus can be deemed as weird and religious. However, Christians believe that through their belief, they have been saved and made new in Christ.
That video minutes, so for the sake of equal videos of contestants, I will only show this test. Thank you so much, Gabriel. And we have one more submission in the next category, which is podcast by Singing Song.
Hello, I'm Lily. About today's podcast, I'm going to talk about journalism in times of global unrest. It is true that until today, factors of global unease elements remain, which leads to global unrest. Examples of global wars between Israel and Palestine, Russia and Ukraine, tensions between North Korea and South Korea, the commercial war between America and China. Then what roles does journalism play in these situations? What problems they might face during the report session? What should journalism do when facing these problems? Today, I want to focus on one of the typical situations that journalism must face in the times of global unrest: war reports, and briefly answer those questions. So, what roles does journalism usually play during war reporting? In my perspective, journalism should convey messages objectively, give the true war content to the public. Journalism is not only a bridge to collect truths of war to the public, but also an important role in the process of war. Like in the War of Vietnam, Americans think it is a war which ends by journalists and media. Because at the beginning of the war, many Americans reported that the purpose of joining the war by the American army was and happiness to Vietnam people. However, after more war reported news, shot videos, and sent pictures back, American people discovered the lying and started to organize anti-war campaign. At last, American government stopped sending armies to Vietnam. Finally, the war was finished by Vietnam themselves. To report war news, journalism often encounters many resistances, like the difficulties to reach the true information, mainly because the killing from the army who don't want some facts to be reported by journalists. Furthermore, many journalists were killed or murdered. 174 journalists were killed and 50 media institutions were attacked in the war between Israel and Palestine. The force and attitude of the government is another restriction. During the war between Russia and Ukraine, American media stand on Ukraine's side to frame Russia as the aggressor and highlight Ukraine's resistance and in international sports. And in Russia, media mostly described it as special military operation rather than a war, and report NATO West as threats, presenting Russia's actions as defensive. Also, some attitudes from journalists affect the direction of the reports as well. However, this is almost unavoidable. It exists in anyone's mind. What journalists should do is to decline the effect as minimum as possible. At the same time, as social media begins to present great power on what's report, it may appear some fake messages that were designed by others, which journalists must think twice before. Lastly, I'd like to talk about how journalism should deal with these challenges and what we should do when facing global unrest as journalists. To begin with, objectivity is the most important part of journalism. All views expressed in the reports should be based on facts instead of imagination. There might be potential attitude in everyone's mind, but facts are facts. They always exist. What journalism should do is avoid news sources only from one side and to collect information as widely as possible and piece them together to find truth. About murder on war reporters, there's no other way but to stick to the face of being a journalist, know more about local situations to get information, or recruit local people as journalists who are more familiar with local incidents, which is also a good way to help people at wars to achieve a better life. Journalism institutions and the government who sent the journalists to the war area should also give as much support as possible and try their best protecting journalists' benefit. Journalism workers should avoid hatred and violence and wars in the news, for the public are all at emotional times when facing the war news. Journalism workers should be the guide person to let audience know the facts more rationally and set out the message of anti-war. That's all for today's podcast. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. That was by the singing song. Guys, we really appreciate the diversity of topics and the way how you approach that really difficult thing, and I'm sure it was a creative post. But can you tell us a little bit more about the inspiration? What was inspiring you to produce this video? I was told you can use these microphones. So who wants to start? Go ahead.
So I would...
Does it work?
For the stream, yeah.
Okay, well, use my microphone.
So an inspiration for mine was probably my own experience to faith, as I only became a Christian last year. So I kind of just wanted to share the experience of what it's like, because I felt there's a lot of stereotypes in film and television about how they are, and in my own experience personally, it was nothing like what I had seen. And I found that everyone was so kind and welcoming, so I wanted to share that, and also the persecution side, because there's no Christian persecution in the media, and especially not mainstream media anymore. So I kind of wanted to push for that message a little bit more to be shared. So an inspiration I took from my actual documentary was, there's a film called A Case of Christ, and it's something that a man called Easter wrote, it's based on his book, and his story of becoming an atheist to a Christian, and he was actually a journalist. And I just really liked the way the film had such an investigative kind of style to it, so I wanted to try and put that into my documentary. I kind of wish it was more like the film was, but obviously I'm still learning, so it wasn't. But yeah, so that's kind of one of my big inspirations. But then also the people around me, because I heard like experiences that had had because of what they believe in. I kind of wanted to share that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Binyu.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about my experience to produce this piece. First, I will talk about the reason I chose the topic. When we mentioned the topic of journalism in terms of global unrest, the first thing that jumps into my mind is the impact of COVID-19 on journalism, because that was also my first challenge on the job. I was working for a newspaper at that time. I need to bring the COVID-19 story to the audience as quickly as possible and from different angles. For example, we need to report the number of news cases, epidemic, prevention tips. What's more is the hero deeds of some doctors. During my time on the job, I could feel my company's future becoming worse due to the downturn in the market. Many governments have reduced their financial support for publicity. Does the audience like our stories? How many people are watching? Should we call healthcare workers heroes? At that time, I didn't have time to think about it. And this piece is the best opportunity for me to think about this question. Then I will explain why I choose to play dual roles and vertical video. First, due to the time limit and serious topics, I wanted to create a contrasting so that the audience can better understand what I want to express. Second, in order to conform to the tone of the TikTok platform, I decided to use the way I ask myself and answer myself to push my explanation of the topic. My way may not be the best, but I understand a lot of things that confused me before through this competition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello, I'm Tan Yong, and when I read this topic, the first thing came to my mind is war correspondent. I know everyone was that. I thinking about this 3 years ago in Gaza. There is a building, for media workers were bombed, attacked. I was shocking at that time, so I decided to. I decided to protect my. I know that I was shocked because I know that war correspondent should be protected according to international laws or international conventions. So I decided to present my ideas in form of this, as you saw. Data video, which made the result more visual and allowed the viewers to get a sense to dangers faced by war correspondent nowadays. So I think it makes sense. So based on the changing dynamics of numbers and icons, you can directly say how risks our war correspondents are encounter. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Birdi, the broadcast. The main thing that inspired me to finish this work is a video on YouTube that a woman reporter was reporting on the war between Israel and Palestine when she was and a bomb was dropped out of the building behind her, and it was collapsed, and she was very shocked. I was impressed by her brave action, and then she reported the news after the boom, and I think she's very brave, and I see there are many world working on this kind of news, and so this is why it inspired me to finish this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's okay.
I'm Maki, and I'm from Japan. And this was my first time in my life to make the video because I have been working for a newspaper company in Tokyo for 20 years, physical newspaper. So I don't have any skills. So I tried to do interview to the students in Western Park protesting for the Gaza, but they had already gone. So then I decided to do the online interview to the Japanese film distributor because he's very passionate for the Gaza, and then he's very unique, and his works was worth sharing with you. So that's why I choose this topic.
Thank you. Is it only moving on to ask our panelists?
Thank you for your submissions and your answers so far. Can you tell us what do you think the biggest threat to journalism is today?
And while I'm working,
one threat I think as journalists today is the freedom of speech. Everyone has freedom of speech, but I feel like there's a lot of stories that probably haven't been released because journalists may have a fear of they're going to get killed or kidnapped. I know that tends to happen a lot in journalism, but we don't really see anything about it. When I was in the lecture 2 weeks ago, found out 120 people were killed last year, and I've seen absolutely nothing about that. So I think a big threat would probably be the fear of actually relaying that information to the public, which needs to be put out there. But then another threat I'd say is AI, but not necessarily in the sense of losing your jobs, but more with written journalism. I think the specialty of it is having that connection to whoever's writing the article. So I think if you were to bring like AI into written journalism, you'd almost lose that feeling of you can connect to what you're reading because it's a lot more, obviously less human. So I think that's a big threat, and also just the fact that I think there's more of a unique way of someone writing themselves, more passion and emotion behind it, and if you just put AI into that would be gone.
It's the truth, because sometimes the truth is not black or white, but full of gray area. The core responsibility of journalists is to expose the truth and deliver truthful information to the public.
Yeah, I think the personal safety is still a big issue for nowadays journalists. Even though there are many other risks, life is important. Yeah, and I mentioned in my video, it's also a significant number of journalists die on the job. Not only war correspondent, it's the most viral part of journalists die, but there are also many journalists have died exposing crime or some problems, and even corruption, something like that, etc. So since when we journalists finding truth, there are always who don't want me find them. Mm-hmm. So with evidence in technology developing, journalists have increasingly vulnerable to hackers, and they can access journalists' mobile phones and PCs, find who you are, find where you are, so know the sources of the information, and you know your home address, working units, and threaten their personal safety. Yeah, so not only find them, but also track journalist involvement and do some threat, even attacked physically. So that's all.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other responses?
Similar.
I think is because everyone has its an opinion on something and there's resistance on government or something that resist the journalist to get the facts correctly. So I think it's important.
Yeah, my answer is similar to others. Yeah, indifference towards journalism is a big threat, especially from many politicians ignore journalism. That's a big threat.
Thank you. Following. You can think about your question now.
I've got this. So you don't need to walk. Thank you all very much for your submissions. We really enjoyed watching them. So my question is, what do you think you can do personally to get that message out there that journalists need to be protected and to help and protect journalists in these troubled times?
I think that the way that we can protect journalists in these troubled times is I think we take more resources available, so whether that's training, how to protect, also having more things like maybe like a hotline or some sort of safe house for the time that really big stories get put out which could be a threat to someone. So I think that's important. And then also I think just trying to push by writing more articles and making more videos on how much journalists in today's society.
I think it's important to have a good environment to the journalists, because a good creative includes open promotion opportunities, regular training, and attention to the physical and mental health of journalists. So we can maybe the newspaper leaders and with the government to improve the environment.
I mentioned as a video, even though there are lots of laws, international laws to protect journalists, but its work limit. But so I think the most important is our journalists. We should protect ourselves through many ways, like we can improve physical and digital safety training. Just liberty, physical, protect ourselves. Work correspondents. Training before they go to from line, and for digital part we can learn some IT ability to protect ourselves, to be tracked or something like that, and we can use some softwares to protect our information safety, and that's all.
I have said. She said what I want to say. I just want to say is just to know more about the environment you are going to work and get familiar with the local situation. That's a way to protect yourself. Yes.
What I can tell is for journalists, just keep working hard. Yeah. Because people would realize the importance of journalism only when they're in danger or in the crisis. We need to prepare all the time. We need to protect ourselves.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, to your submissions. I think you shared with me how great the approaches were and your creativity and the time that you spent. So the announcements on who is going to get the prize will be made Thursday, the closing ceremony at 1. Yeah? At 1 o'clock. So please make sure to attend this. But the announcement for everyone from global and first year undergrads, everyone can participate in the quiz that is going to be on Wednesday. It's going to be online, and it's going to be for everyone who participates. The quiz questions are based on the information from the panels, starting from the one that is going to begin in a few minutes time, and until the one that is going to take place on Wednesday right before quiz. So check, be attentive, listen to the panelists, listen to the speakers, listen to the lecturers, make notes, and who knows, maybe you're going to win another prize for the quiz. And we will proceed with the next session.
Wow. That was amazing. I know we put our hands together for them. Can we do this again? That was really good. Very creative, very diverse productions. And to think that some of those who have done this have not produced before, and some of the works really look like they had experience. I thought maybe some of them had previous experience that failed. That's why they did that. But really diverse productions, very touching presentations. Thank you. All right. Let's put our hands together. Jessana, she's going there now. Yeah. Thank you very much for helping us with this production. Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, Jessana helped us with the creative media production. I didn't know when she sneaked in. Just saw her going out. All right, so we're going to have a very short break before we go into the election panel. A very important panel where you've been sitting for a while now. So we are going to have a 10-minute break. Yeah. So 10-minute break. After that, we'll start the election panel. Thank you.
I'm not used to it. Right, am I?
This is for the break. So it's going to be live streamed. So these are the live stream. You can use this when you're speaking, just for the room.
Great.
Right.
Wonderful.
It's on mute at the moment. Is that
no, of course.
Great.
So how was your meeting with students?
Really great. Loads of amazing questions. Yeah, very much.
This is your co-panelist, Oksana.
Hi, Oksana. Nice to meet you. Right.
Dominic and
I'm just wondering which end of this to put myself on.
Okay, so I'm going to sit here as well. I was going to stand over there, but it just felt.
Oh, great. So shall I move there?
I'll sit on the end here.
Great.
Oh, okay. I can sit here.
You're all right. Don't worry. You're all right.
Yes. A little bit.
Yeah, no, of course. Okay. I was just saying that these microphones will be recording for the live stream, but if you use this one as well when you're speaking, so if we
New to me. I was when I was studying journalism, I was in 9 Muffin Street, so about 15 minutes down the road. A lot less nice than this. So no,
It's a very nice building.
Yeah, no, it's lovely and good. It's a great setup.
Yeah.
I was just up speaking to some of the master's students who did the same courses as me. So that was that's got me in my mind ready for people's questions.
Поболтаем после, потому что мне надо будет домой ехать. У Оли температура. Я сегодня справлюсь. У него скачок. Лик. У него лик. И он прямо проснулся было в 12, начал орать. Я спал внизу на диване, потому что там меньше всего было слышно. Мне надо было встать в 4, чтобы на поезд. Я сегодня 4 я еле-еле встала в 7. Еле-еле. Ему уже 6. Ему год будет. Через 2 недели. Через неделю. Все еще не продолжается. Они же до 18 месяцев. Сейчас, потом будет в январе, потом в марте. У нас самые... Я не думаю, что он настолько был включен. Ну нет. Ну, наши, они после 6 месяцев, они как-то спокойнее становятся, они становятся такие очень пупсики. Ну, да и нет, стало проще. Это правда. Обычно такое было. Но вот сейчас у него идет вот это решать. А это прям смертельно. Оля вешает, она мне пишет, что я же сдернусь. Слушай, ну зовите меня, я могу переключаться, помогать, там, не знаю, ей подобно там. Тебе делать нечего, когда у тебя работа? Ну, я всегда это делаю. Не, серьезно, я знаю. Я понимаю, я просто фактически помогала выращивать детей, внуки большие, и там было тяжело, потому что он действительно никому не ходил. Он до сих пор не ходит. Мамина фаза. Ну, давай потом.
It's actually the first time I've been to Sheffield since. It's interesting to see what buildings are new and what's been knocked down. I just walked past where I used to live in Brooks, and the house I lived in is gone. So it makes me feel quite old. Hopefully not the metaphor. But yeah, this is a fantastic building. Really amazing facilities. Really impressive.
Yeah, and the hall, we have lots of space and the hall.
Yeah, really, really good. Were you studying in Sheffield as well?
No, actually, Hi.
I'm Bina.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hi, Bina. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet your face.
Put the face on that email. Oh, the long email about the second. And when I sent him, I said, I guess so that you read this from the beginning to the end. Yeah, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
We're glad you're here now.
Yeah, I'm honored to be invited.
Calm down.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'd be great. The standard of questions was so high as well from the
Really?
Yeah, it made me think on the spot a lot. So if that's anything to go by, I'm really looking forward to this as well.
Okay. All right. Let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So with the initial 5-10 minute tour, any preference as to who goes first, or are you happy just to go with it? Should we go with the order on the screen?
Yeah,
perfect.
Maybe we'll start with some of my colleagues.
Start with someone else.
And I'm happy to go first.
So happy to
if
go
that
first.
works.
We'll
And then
go
maybe we could just pass the microphone down the panel. No, happy to have just had the chance to blabber a bit about myself, so quite the same opportunity.
That's absolutely fine. So we've got that, then we'll move into some sort of discussion, I'll ask a few questions. Then we're going to have a 5-10 minute break. Then we've got a video from Jonathan ITN, which I'll play, which is about 15 minutes. That's been questions from the audience, and then we'll be finished by about 10 to 4. So.
You covering elections now?
Yes. I cover UK politics, so much of this year was covering the election, and really did come out of nowhere. Rishi Sunak sort of shocked us all because we all thought that it would be around this time of the year. So we thought that there'd maybe be a second budget or financial statement in order to it wasn't to be. So, brilliant! This was wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much. It's helped me keep my cool as far as possible. Brilliant, thank you. And I'll try to avoid the microphone.
But there was a statement about the key raise expected.
Yes. It's all.
It's not there yet.
Yeah, I think there's I think tuition fees going up this afternoon.
But does it any case might be for the UK politics from the US election?
From the US, I think part of it will be David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary's, when he was not Foreign Secretary, he was quite rude about Trump and quite critical. So when Trump was president the first time around, he said that sort of like Trump bordered on fascism and racism and all the rest of it, and he supported like the anti-Trump protests that took place here when Trump came here on. Lammy was among those saying he should have come. So it should be very interesting.
Welcome to our panel discussion on covering elections. Our focus very much on the UK, the US, maybe on France, and looking at other areas of our discussion. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tim Hopkinson, and I'm going to be moderating the panel with our guests who we'll introduce in a moment. So 2024 has been a year of elections, maybe the year of elections. So nearly 50% of the world's population has been or is going to the polls this year. Election here in the UK, there have been elections in Europe, including France, and the EU itself, elections in South America, Africa, Asia, in India, where nearly people are eligible to vote. And tomorrow we've got the long-anticipated, long-expected, possibly long-dreaded US election, dependent on how you view it. Will it be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump heading to the White House? We'll wait and see. As journalism students, each of you is stepping into a profession that is more scrutinised than ever before, especially in this pivotal year. So this year's elections are not only determining the leadership of countries, they are determining the policies on a global scale as well. And this is central to this, is the role of media and journalism. So how much does the media shape political opinion? Does it shape people's vote? How much does it actually get people to go out to vote? With social media, 24-hour news, AI-generated content, the information landscape has become complex, polarised, making the role of journalists, potentially the role of some of you, critical. So to help us discuss the challenges faced and the responsibilities facing journalists, campaigners and those in the media in this election year, we've got three members of our panel here in Sheffield. Oksana, Matthew and Dominic are with us, plus Jonathan Wald, who has been answering questions, some of the questions that you've submitted to him as a member of ITV News in America, and we'll be listening to him later on. So I'm going to ask each, first of all, just to give an introduction to themselves, so about who they are, their background, how they're involved in maybe election coverage or elections themselves, whether that be in the past or this year. So I think we're going to start off with Dominic.
Hi, thank you so much everyone for having me and for being here today. My name is Penna. I'm political correspondent at the Daily Telegraph. And the biggest event in British politics this year was obviously the UK election. So just a little bit about me. 6 years ago, I was lucky enough to be on the MA journalism course. I did 4 very, very happy years here in Sheffield. Firstly, a BA in international relations and politics, and then my MA journalism course, which I know that a lot of you are on at the moment, and doing the BA as well, on various forms of journalism degree that are offered here in Sheffield. I started the Telegraph just after another election, 19, so I started in January 2020. At this point, it looked as though Boris Johnson was sort of set for 5, 10, some people even said 15 years in office. That obviously didn't come to pass. He was followed by Liz Truss, and then very swiftly after that followed by Rishi Sunak. Lots of infighting was the order of the day in the Tory party in the last couple of years. And casting my mind back to May and the first proper general election I covered, it really took me by surprise when Rishi Sunak won the election, and I think it took the country by surprise as well. I remember it was quite only Wednesday in May, and it just felt like another normal day. I came in for my early shift, for Prime Minister's questions, and so for today's programme, Chris Mason said like it was the most casual thing in the world. Oh yes, and there's rumours in Westminster that Rishi Sunak might call an election later today. So by that point we were on high alert. David Cameron, the then Foreign Secretary, flew back from, I think, Albania, where he was on a visit at the time. And at that point we knew something was up. And then there was that famous scene of Sunak, the rain outside Downing Street, saying he'd got inflation down to 2%. Of the country, and all of us in the lobby and journalists in the country in general had expected that there would be an election at this time of year. So in my head, I wouldn't have been in front of you guys in November. I'd have been sort of key swing constituencies. I'd be covering TV debates, etc., etc. Sunak chose to go early and free events during the campaign, which many people sort of think doomed Sunak and sealed the fate of the Conservatives. The first of those was the return of Nigel Farage reform, which pulled away a lot of people who would have voted Tory or stayed at home, and reform ended up with 4 million votes. The second was the betting scandal. The last thing the Conservatives had hoped for was another scandal with Rishi Sunak's parliamentary private secretary at the time putting on the date of the election, and that just sort of snowballed into another set of negative headlines for the Tories. And then the third was the row over Sunak leaving the D-Day commemorations early, all of which were sort of massively important in swinging both the tone and the coverage. General election coverage by all outlets, obviously, some of them more favourable and unfavourable towards the Conservatives than others, but I think there was agreement that they were three things that did really lead to prospects. Then, before we knew it, we were on the road with a lot of those politicians, lots of early shifts, lots of late shifts, lots of early mornings and late nights, but all super exciting. I was the Labour battle bus for a week, so in Bristol, ending up not too far from here actually, ending up in York for the leaders' question time debate with Sunak and Starmer and Ed Davey. Super exciting to actually be there. And then the very, very final day of the campaign, I was on the battle bus with Rishi Sunak on what would end up being his last day as a serving Prime Minister. He went back home to Southampton, and there was a really interesting moment where we had all been briefed in the press. Rishi Sunak speaking to say X, Y, Z, and halfway through he went completely off script, started talking a lot more about himself, about his values, about his family, and one wonders whether we had seen more of that side of Sunak during the campaign, whether that would have made a difference, or whether there was just so much resentment that had built up towards the Tory party that it was a bit of a foregone conclusion anyway. But no, it is wonderful to be back here in Sheffield, really excited to get into the meat and bones of not just the UK election, but obviously tomorrow's battle royale between Harris and Trump, and really looking forward to the questions that you might have.
Thank you. My name is Oksana, and I'm originally from Russia, from Siberia, right in the middle of Russia, from the city which was called Media Anomaly, because we had a TV company, small broadcasting company in our city, which won lots of national TV prizes and was considered one of the most professional regional companies in the country back in the time when professionalism in journalism was appreciated in Russia. And then I spent more than 20 years in TV journalism as a correspondent, as an editor, as a camera person, as a video editor, as a producer, in many different, all possible capacities, you name it, just I've been all. And I've been working for the BBC in Moscow bureau, and then in 2016 I moved to London, and I've been working for the BBC here from London, for the Russian service, for the BBC World Service, covering Russian events for English-speaking, mainly British, but all over the world as well. Audience from the Russia, from former space, the Eastern European countries, the Caucasian countries, and these areas, and also covering international news and events for the Russian audience, for Russian-speaking audience, it's better to say. So I've been a field producer for in Washington for the first Trump elections, which actually no one expected, and when we went there, me and my team, like, okay, well, this is just some kind of a circus to survive, but everyone knows what would happen. but actually no one knew in reality what will happen. It was complete surprise for everyone, when Trump won the elections. And I remember this was a very emotional trip. And as a journalist covering some political events, you're not getting that much involved in that emotions, because it's more about analysis, it's more about numbers and graphs and the polls and opinions. So it's less that emotional. But that year in the US, it was really, really emotional. The custom guy, the guy at the custom service, when we just arrived in the airport, and he asked, what are we doing, like the normal questions at the passport control, and he said, are you a journalist? Yeah, we're working for the BBC. Okay, so you're going to cover this election campaign? I said, yes, and he was, I'm sorry for that. So that is when I understood that it's not going to be boring, this trip. Then a couple of things I realized on the way is what was new for me as a journalist, as a professional journalist at that time, is that actually media might be not balanced at all, and it's a kind of normal, and that media can be biased. And it's, again, kind of normal, and it works within the system with the US, because I saw CNN linking Trump every day, every second, any way they could. And I saw Fox News rooting for Trump, again, in any way they could. It was surprising for me, because 20 years of my career was about balance, objectivity, and everything, and all this. Every conflict has two sides. You have to check and recheck and give positions of all the sides. And suddenly I see completely different picture there. And but somehow, later I understood that somehow the balance of the opinions and the positions in the U.S. was held by within the system, not within one media, but within different media. So like you have media speaking from one side, you have other media speaking from another side, and this is the kind of a balance of the whole system. While here is more likely, for the BBC, at least for most of European media companies, is the balance within the media, so within one media. So it was something new for me. And another thing is that people there really cared about the election results, and I've got an agreement with one of the families in Washington, because they have, like here in Britain, people watch football matches at the pubs, and in the US they have the same tradition, but watching the election night. So they're gathering. They have a kind of a celebration watching election night, and they're watching election night in the pubs. So that was surprising again for me. So, and I was invited, our team was invited to film at one of the family's house. They were inviting their friends and guests to watch the election results. And but when it became kind of obvious that Trump is going to win in a late night, this lady, she called me and she was crying. Literally, she was crying on the phone, and she said, we just cannot bear to speak. And all our friends, they were so depressed, they went home, and we cannot speak now. And she was crying on the phone, and I was so surprised. Oh my God, really? It's like people take it seriously here. And next day on DuPont Square is one of the central places in Washington. People started together, and they held meetings for hugging each other and supporting each other. They had hugs because they were coming and crying because they were upset, they were depressed, they were traumatized, what I say, traumatized at that point. And that was really surprising for me how people perceive the elections there. And but obviously, since then, the the world became, and for media, is not the question of balance, just the question of balance anymore. Is the question of checking, is the question of verification with AI, with development of social media, with UGC content, journalism. It's getting much more. It's getting to much bigger challenge for journalists to cover these election campaigns, because you have to be not double aware all the time, but even triple or quadra aware. What are you saying? What are you showing? And about your sources. So. Just a couple of things about me again. I did some research work at Reuters Institute of International Journalism in Oxford about business models for regional TV companies. Here in the UK and in Russia, it was a comparison research. Several years ago, I understood that it's interesting for me not to just tell what people are doing. I'm interested why they are doing, and I guess this American elections was not their last role in that. So I moved my career to psychology, and I'm working as a freelance journalist now for some media still, and I'm working as a psychotherapist and psychology consultant for media organizations. I'm working with journalists who comes back from conflict zones, who are stressed from the video footage for topics they're covering, so mostly with journalists. And it added some dimension for how I now perceive the elections and what is going on, because I see it now from the psychological point of view, from the point of social psychology as well. So it's really interesting to look from this angle too. And at some point, I really envy for journalists covering this year elections, multiple elections now, because it's really, really, really interesting year and really challenging. And what comes tomorrow after the US elections might really change the world. So I guess it's really, really interesting, and I'm curious to see what will happen. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Tim, for inviting me. I studied 5 years ago, and this is my first time back, so it's fantastic to be here. And when I studied here, this building didn't exist. Makes me feel extremely old. I walked past the halls of residence I stayed in my first year, and they've been knocked down. Hopefully not a metaphor for tomorrow's election, but it is really fantastic to be back in Sheffield and to speak with all of you. I feel a little behind enemy lines in that I'm the non-journalist in the room. I've worked in campaigns and communications for the last 25 years, and a big part of my role in a lot of the jobs is to try and shape coverage and to win coverage and to communicate through the media and other outlets on the campaigns that I've worked on. And I kind of have a career that is in two halves. The first few years I worked in campaigning, I was a press officer. And so I did things like the morning clips, where we'd have to physically cut up newspapers and turn them into packs of paper to fax to all of our senior staff. Faxing sounds incredibly old-fashioned nowadays, I'm sure, but it was a big job, cold calling journalists, pushing press releases and the like. And in around 2007-8, I got really interested in digital communications. Howard Dean ran for president in 2004 and used what was called New in those days to try and win the Democratic nomination to run against George W. Bush in that election year. And Barack Obama was running for president against the overwhelming favorite Hillary Clinton. So I spent some time in the US and tried to learn from American unions and campaign groups and politicians, and I've been working in digital communications ever since. I don't like it, but I'm a dual UK-US citizen. I've already cast my vote for Kamala Harris, and I've got a lot of hope for tomorrow. It's always the hope that gets you, but I think that Harris is going to win the election. I don't think it's going to be pretty, and I think it's going to take a while to work itself out, but because my wife is American and I became an American citizen, we moved to the States in 2010. And I had a number of jobs working on campaigns for the Democratic Party, for the Democratic Party committees, and I worked for Barack Obama in 2012 as the Director of Digital Rapid Response. Really what that meant was that me and my team were responsible for everything the Obama campaign put out about Mitt Romney. So Mitt Romney was someone I read about and talked about and thought about for around 18 hours a day for a year and a half, and he was a very big part of my life. I still miss him now, and he's suddenly become the voice of moderation, which certainly wasn't the case in 2012. In 2012, I've worked both in the US and the UK. I worked on the general election for Ed Miliband in 2015. I worked for Kevin Rudd in the Australian federal election of 2013, and a whole range of other campaigning organisations. But throughout my career, whether it is as a press officer doing digital campaigning or digital communications, there's a thread that runs through everything I did, which is to try and use the tools that we have in our hands, whether that is the ability to talk to the media, to use digital communications to shape what the media is saying, or to communicate directly with the voters or the different audiences amongst voters that we wanted to reach, to try and get our message of persuasion and mobilization out in a way that would win campaigns or win elections. And I think that the theory behind all of those different approaches is consistent whichever one you are trying to do in any particular. So it's a 25-year career over a very, very changing media, one that is completely unrecognisable today than it was when I first started. When Labour last left office in 2010, Instagram literally didn't exist. So there have been a lot of changes, but there is a consistent theme throughout, which is trying to use the tools in your armoury to communicate that message that can win campaigns.
Okay, so we're going to move on to some questions which I'll start the discussion in a moment. But just to say, if you want questions, we'll open it to you all later on, and you can, shout out. Equally, if you're not that sure about speaking out, then we do have a WooClap page that you can log on to. So it is simple. Log on to WooClap. The event code is IJW2020. So if you want to use that, then that is there now. I will leave it on the screen for a few moments while people scan the QR code. But yeah, do put your questions on there. Possibly won't be able to answer them all, but we can get an idea of the kinds of things that you'll want to ask the panel. Just scanning that code and thinking about that, I was going to start us off with a question, and I will come over there in a moment rather than shouting across the lecture theatre. But just what do you think are the main issues, not just in the US, but across the elections that have taken place this year? What would you see are the common threads running through the main issues that the elections are focused on? Shall we start off? Or Dominic, if you've got an idea. Certainly are, especially with the UK and US elections. A lot of common threads. It's obviously been a very, very difficult couple of years, both for the British and American economies. there's been sort of domestic factors, but also global pressures, for example, the spiralling energy prices, the aftershocks of Ukraine, and increasingly isolationist China, and there's a bit of a trade war there as well. So that has been one of the common threads, and what we have seen in a lot of elections this year is sort of an incumbency problem, where when people have to vote out whoever was in charge 4 years ago, by and large they have done so. So, for example, the odds worked against the Conservatives, and so at the start of this year the odds were stacked against the Democrats. Whether Harris has done enough in those few months since Joe Biden stepped down, we will see, but that has been one of the threads, sort of an anti-establishment mood, and it's something that Labour tapped into in a way. They had a one-word election slogan, which was change. From the other side of the political spectrum, it's something that Reform have tapped into. Nigel Farage trying to paint Conservatives and Labour as two sides of the same coin. And then the other issues have been sort of the knock-on cost of living effects of the state of the economy, people feeling that they're not as well off as either they want to be or they were a few years ago. Very, very different views as well on, for example, here, how close we should be to Europe, and sort of the legacy of Brexit. And then again in America, should America be making more trade deals? Should it be more of a global and internationalist nation, or should it have what Trump would call the more America first, isolationist, protectionist mindset? And one real point of contrast between the UK and the US elections is that Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, the two men who were realistically, one of them was going to be Prime Minister, have both been absolutely steadfast in their support for Ukraine, and that is something a majority of Brits think is a great thing, and that support for Ukraine has continued. We saw it with extra billions of pounds at the budget under Sir Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak was constantly upping support for Ukraine as well. It is certainly a bit more of a fault line in the American election tomorrow, and there is certainly a lot of anxiety in some quarters about what would a Republican, what would a Trump win mean for Ukraine. Others think that Boris Johnson, for example, yesterday was claiming that Trump had actually done more for Ukraine when he was in office than the Democrats had, but Ukraine is certainly a divide between the Democrats and the Republicans in a way that I suspect most British people would be grateful that it is not here.
What I think is some of the main issues for this electoral and political campaigns all over the world for now, and with connection to media, is first thing is the greater polarization. Basically everywhere is the huge polarization which was there back in 2016, for example, but now it got even worse over different topics. We see the polarization in Europe too, of Gaza question, of supporting or not supporting Ukraine, weapons and money. Shall we do this, or shall we resolve somehow our cost of living crisis, or questions like that, and left and right, and sometimes they are mixing up and changing places, like basically right in the US now is became left somehow. So it's bigger polarization is more attempts of meddling using new technologies like AI, like we remember this case of Mark Dugan, who created like 160 fake media sites and was spreading fake articles using the AI about Zelensky, like he's dealing drugs from Argentina or something like that, and millions of people read it and taken it as a true information. So this is one of the biggest challenge in political campaigns of nowadays. The AI fake news, well, let's not say Trump, but it's the reality. Dealing with this fake information, dealing with meddling of different kinds, cyber attacks, and so it's more like these technology issues apart from greater polarization in societies. And the biggest world political issues now is the Ukraine question and the question of Israel and Palestine, and campaigns they are going to influence these questions a lot. So this is the main topics where they kind of surround it, and make I would say the fate, but the result will depend on the positions on these questions. Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, I think colleagues have already made the key points about incumbency and the price that incumbents are paying for the inflationary crisis that's hit so many of the countries having elections. And I think in many ways Donald Trump is responsible for the US election being in any way close. If Donald Trump wasn't the candidate, I think that Kamala Harris would have a really, really hard time winning this election, because across the world incumbents have struggled because people's standard of living have gone down over the last couple of years. There's a famous documentary about the 1992 presidential election called War Room. James Carville, who was Bill Clinton's kind of communications strategist, had a sign on the wall that said, "Change versus more of the same. It's good. Don't forget healthcare." And in many ways, elections are no different now than they are then in terms of the fundamentals that drives voter behaviour. And in a world where people's standard of living has got worse, change is significantly more attractive than more of the same. I remember in 2011 being briefed about focus groups that we had run of people that voted for Barack Obama in 2008 and then voted for a Tea Party candidate in 2010. So going from the first president, voting for the first black president, a liberal guy, to voting for a hardline conservative candidate 2 years later. And one of the participants in the focus group said, growing up, all I've ever wanted is to be able to have a job that will allow me to buy my own children to college. I've lost my job, I've lost my house, and I can't afford to keep a college fund. And I'm going to vote to fire people until my life gets better. And I think that's you can see that repeating itself now. That was after the global financial crash of 2008. The elections that are being waged across the countries we're talking about is being waged after a cost of living crisis that has made people's lives worse. And elections are about fundamental questions of people's standard of living and whether there is an economy that works for most people. And we don't have that at the moment in a lot of the countries we're talking about, and voters are rationally responding to that. The quirk in the countries we're talking about is that Donald Trump, in the words of his own former chief of staff, is a fascist to his country's constitution and democracy and the healthcare of half of the electorate in women. And voters are rationally responding to that as well. But if he wasn't the candidate, I don't think it would be a close election because of the points that have been made already.
Thanks. Oksana, you mentioned about fake news, although you didn't want to use that term, but how do journalists respond to fake news? How are we meant to deal with news that we can't trust, or maybe in a debate correcting news, misinformation out there, or maybe lies that are told? How do journalists deal with that?
Yeah, so in recent years, the big media, the BBC and Bloomberg, I guess, they did so too. The big media organizations, Radio Liberty, they have it, I guess, as well. They had to create special departments to verify content, to verify sources, to verify footage, to verify information incoming. So it was not the case years ago, because there was not that much spread of technologies and dealing with AI only like for a year, and media organizations had to create special departments because it's a huge pressure on journalistic work on newsrooms because they are busy to do their work, and and kind of they have to double their work, double their efforts to even check what they are getting. So they had to create another department doing this job to make a bit less pressure on the newsroom, because it's really a problem. And like before, we had to verify if some news from one agency, okay, well, let's check in another agency. So there was a simple fact check. It was a simple 2 sources, 3 sources, and that's enough, and we're good to go. But now it's not like that. Now you have to verify sources you are getting from, and it's not just this. It's you have to verify UGC content, the contact from social networks. You have to check the metadata of this content, and especially, yes, you have to deal with this possibly AI-generated videos, possibly AI-generated articles and information. And apart from creating special departments for doing this job, to help the newsroom and help the viewers to understand what is true and what is not, it also puts a pressure on the journalists themselves, calling for their judgment, calling for their kind of feeling of sense, you know, what makes sense, what makes less sense, what's possible, what is less possible, where I should be suspicious or where I should let it go or where I should trust what I'm reading, what I'm seeing. So it's another level of awareness in the profession, and it's really difficult already now, and will become difficult further when it will be difficult to. For now, you can say with AI-generated videos, most likely in most cases, you can see that it's kind of not truly natural, 100%. In many cases, you can say that. But with the development of this technology, very soon we will not be able to make a distinguish. So it will depend also on the, let's call it defense technologies, who will technologies counter helping journalists and helping audiences to check the content against possible AI meddling. So most likely it will be a struggle. There will be a war, a fight of technologies in this case, and again the awareness and the personal judgment will play a huge role in this process.
Okay. Dominic, just thinking, I mean, we think of fake news and possibly we think of America straight away, but there's then been accusations of the truth told by politicians in this country, surprise, surprise, but how do you deal with that as a political reporter in this country?
So one of the great things about a lot of what we do is that, one, there is a regulation in place where if an article about someone isn't accurate, then there is a system for that. We also particularly at organisations like the Telegraph, where we have just over 1 million paid subscribers. Our audiences expect, and there is a clear demarcation of what is news, what is opinion. What has been worrying in recent months is, for example, a lot of the online misinformation, for example, especially around the dreadful killings in Southport, where there were articles being generated, for example, overseas, which named a suspect, and Elon Musk shared a fake Telegraph headline, and that was up on his X feed for about half an hour. It was an article supposedly published by the Telegraph, which hadn't been, which thankfully was pulled down sort of in fairly short order, but especially with changes that have been made. And I think the lack of trust in politics and in politicians, and when politicians often seem to make promises and row back on them pretty quickly, and a lot of people feel sort of in the wake of the budget that is increasingly the case across the aisle as well. A lot of people feel misled by some of what Labour said in the general election. A lot of people felt misled by what the Conservatives said, for example, Boris Johnson's initial response to Partygate while in office. There is sort of a gradual erosion of trust in politicians, and that means it is more likely that when there is news, even when it is viable sites playing into things that people themselves want to believe, then it is very to do so.
Matthew, just thinking about fake news, on the other side of it, Donald Trump has referred to journalists as fake news, peddling fake news as he but also he talked very recently that he wouldn't mind if the journalist got in the way of the shooter when he was him. How do you think things have changed in the relationship between political parties, or the role that you had, and journalists themselves now?
I think it's important to differentiate between what's happening in the United States and in India or other countries. American politics looms incredibly large around the world, but we just don't have the same kind of situation as is happening in the US. Donald Trump regularly seeks to inspire his supporters to abuse journalists at the very least. It's just not something that happens in other countries, thank goodness. So I think it's important to differentiate between the two. The role of fake news is an important factor for campaigners in thinking about how we communicate with the public, because ultimately the media are really a means to an end for campaigners, which is to get our message across to the public, and frankly fake news, but also the public's trust in the media regardless of fake news is a really big factor for campaigns. And that's why you'll have seen in this election in particular in the US, and increasingly, not as much, but increasingly in the UK and Europe, campaigns looking to reach the public through alternative avenues. Kamala Harris has done a lot of interviews with podcasts, content creators. The White House had a major event for content creators a couple of weeks ago, and campaigns in the UK general election really focused significantly on paid media. There are obviously no TV ads in the UK, but spending on Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising, and elsewhere has really spiked as campaigns in the UK move away from traditional paid media and from to be able to get their message the traditional media. So there are different avenues that campaigns are seeking to use. I think the third thing I would say about the challenge of fake news campaigns perspective is that we try to think about not just the message we're communicating, but the messenger. And so lots of research that people seeing something they read in a newspaper that they've just picked up, something they've seen in their own social media feed or on the BBC website. It's something they hold. If they're sent the same piece of content by someone they personally know in a WhatsApp group or on an Instagram DM, they're more likely to take that piece of content. And so campaigns are investing a lot. We did this at 38 Degrees. The Labour Party invested quite heavily in this kind of digital to try and ensure that the people are hearing about the thing we're trying to say via their friends, rather than, even if the way that they're getting that information, friends sending them a piece of news. So the messenger is a really key part of what we're trying to do. It's happening a lot over the last few days in the States. Harrison Ford has recorded a message for Kamala Harris, and that video is being targeted very, very aggressively at boomer males who treat what Harrison Ford says much more seriously than they treat what Kamala Harris says. So the messenger is a key part of pushing back against fake news as well.
I just wanted to add something about this couple of thoughts following what Dominic said. The thing with the social media and new platforms for delivering messages is making easier to transform voters to the crowd, and it works as well for population because exactly because of the fact that people trust more for their friends and colleagues or reference groups than some traditional media, and the thing of fake news and lack of trust for everything they see and everything they hear in the media. It works in a way people are started to turn from the news. So it's the news avoidance tendency, which is the one of editorial issues for recent time. Is one of the main editorial issues: news avoidance. People overwhelmed. They don't want to pay that much energy in trying to understand and distinguish which is right, which is true, whom to trust, whom to not to trust, and overall this tiredness. This leads to this news avoidance. And where do they go for the information? They go to social networks. They go to their bubbles because if the psychological perspective, there is in social psychology there is a term called confirmation bias, where we tend to believe and pick up information which is consistent with our views and our position. So we tend to pick up this information and trust people delivering this information more than someone else. So it leads to people forming the kind of living in the bubbles of opinion, living in the bubbles of positions, and this in turn, this goes to bigger polarization, larger the amplitude between the positions, and even sometimes a radicalization. And it's becoming harder and harder for at least bigger traditional media to reach their audience because they just don't trust this kind of message delivery anymore. Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break. It's just come up to 3 o'clock, just 5 minutes, so we'll start again at 3:05. So just to say that we'll start the next part of the session with a video from Jonathan in Washington, and then we'll also move on to some of the questions that you put on. Thanks, everyone.
Good luck, Vittel. Thank you. Stay in touch if you need anything. Well. No. Thank you.
take the chance.
Yes, no, of course. Sorry.
Yeah.
We might just do the those rather than asking the room. Yeah. No, that's good. People have got so much to ask.
I mean, some of them are very much election related, and not at all related to the media.
Yeah, no, of course.
We don't need to all answer questions.
No, we just did a one who's
yeah.
There's a couple that say absolutely.
Oh, really? Okay. Not too much swearing, I hope.
No, it was always almost a bit of an chief as soon as you got the chance to submit something which might ended up being shown on the board. I think more sort of for my 18, 19-year-old self. From
Ask anonymously. We didn't have social media when I was a student.
I was going to say, I've just checked my Twitter and I've got like 30 notifications from people live tweeting it. Thank you. So,
Doing okay? Me too. Watching the video first, are we? Are we doing the video first?
I'm sorry, I mispronounced.
No, not at all. We're journalists, we've never been called worse.
Ah, yeah.
A lot of the topics that you were all suggesting you wanted answers to. So Jonathan's going to speak for about answering the questions, and then we'll go into some of the questions that you put on we would like to ask the panel.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Wald. Hello, my name is Jonathan Wald, and I'm the Washington Bureau Chief for ITV News. You currently find me in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I am on the trail of former President Trump. I've been doing this for the last 10 days or so, and my next stop is West Palm Beach, where I plan to spend election day and night at the election night watch party at Trump's headquarters. I'm here to answer several of your questions, and the first is from Haley, which says, from a journalist perspective, why haven't Trump's felonies tanked his campaign? Trump has been a high-profile figure for decades and a politician for 10 years. People already price in his controversial, outrageous behaviour, including the criminal charges and convictions. So as shocking as it is to some, most Americans have made their mind up about him. He's also been somewhat effective in his strategy of delaying these legal cases. As you may know, all but one of the trials have been delayed until after the election. He remains popular with his base. I think it's interesting to compare Trump's offences and other accusations against him with Boris Johnson's offences. Why did it essentially result in Johnson's downfall, while it, according to the polls at least, may not be having as big an impact with Trump? Well, Trump dominates the Republican Party and its political machinery. If you want to survive and thrive in the Republican Party, you have to support and defend Trump. Boris Johnson, whose accusations and offences were less serious than those against Trump, lost the backing of Conservative MPs and his cabinet. And even when he did, like Trump, he remained popular with his base, the Conservative membership. So there are similarities between the two men. But going back to Trump's offences, the effect is on the margins. And in a close election, small differences in opinion can make a big difference. I would make one important caveat. The polls were wrong in 2016 and in 2020. So your question, Haley, relies on the fact that the conviction and charges against Trump haven't made a difference. We don't know that yet. Trump supporters have really leaned into the conviction. I frequently see people with t-shirts saying, I'm voting for the convicted felon. It has helped Kamala Harris, who's been able to frame herself as the prosecutor against the felon, especially in her debate with Trump. Harris has been in the race for around 3 months. It's the shortest ever presidential campaign. She spent the first 2 months introducing herself to an American public who largely didn't know who she was and staking out some of her positions. In the last few weeks, though, she's turned to attacking Trump much more than talking about her personality and policies. She calls him a fascist, unstable, and yes, sometimes a criminal. It's important to note that the media does also play a role. Voters increasingly rely on news sources that reflect their own views. The significance or seriousness of convictions and charges have been diminished by right-wing media like Fox News, claiming what Trump has done is part of a witch hunt, that government departments like the Department of Justice have been weaponized against him for political purposes, and he's not guilty in any case. And while channels like Fox News do have a clear political agenda, it's worth considering at least some of what they say. Take the case of New York's Attorney General Letitia James. She's an elected official who ran on a platform of promising to prosecute Trump, which is exactly what she did, successfully in her fraud case against him. So while there is legal merit to her case, the motivation for bringing it is to some extent political. The next question is from Mackie, who says, before Kamala Harris became a candidate for president, I had always wondered why she was not popular, as I really liked her speech when she became vice president. Then suddenly, she became popular, even though she hadn't changed or anything. I think important decisions should be made more seriously and not depend on momentum. I know this happens a lot in my country, Japan, and that journalism contributes to it. I hate it. I want to hear your opinion. Well, Mackie, before I give you my opinion, I will give you an opinion of a number of people who I've spoken to who have worked in the White House under different administrations. The position of vice president in the US is sometimes referred to as the worst job in politics. When in office, they often have very little power, they're kept out of the limelight, and the jobs they are given are the least desirable, so they don't overshadow the president. This was the case with Kamala Harris, despite the fact that when Biden won in 2020, he suggested he would only run for one term. We now know he had absolutely no intention of doing that, and he gave up his run for a re-election very late and very reluctantly. So he did Kamala Harris no favours at all. She has had 3 months to try and convince America that she should be president. What was the best way for her to achieve that? I would say personality. Personality is so important in US presidential politics. It's more important than personality in UK politics, I would argue. I'm an American citizen. I have dual US and UK citizenship, and I've lived in America for several years and covered other presidential elections, but I haven't covered an election quite as closely as I have this one. I've always recognised that personality plays a big part in US politics, but until this election, I might have underestimated it. There was a key moment for me towards the end of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, just before Kamala Harris was going to give her speech. It would be the most significant of her life and delivered to her largest ever audience on TV and online. So there was pressure for her to get it right. Until that point, she had focused on a broad message of providing stability, a change from what she described as the chaos of Donald Trump's presidency, and an attempt to appeal to all Americans. It was short on policy detail. I had assumed she would use her convention speech to provide that policy detail, but then I interviewed Matt Bennett. Matt Bennett's a Democratic strategist and ran the campaign of Michael Dukakis, the Democratic nominee for president who lost to George Bush Sr. in 1988. Bennett not only said she would not speak about much policy detail in her speech, but that she should not do so. Bennett said the presidential elections are not won on policy, but they can be lost on policy. And if you accept that logic, then even when there are people like you, Mackie, who quite reasonably want to know more about the policies of political candidates, especially one like Kamala Harris, whose policy positions were not very well known, the risks of going into them in great detail are too great. Bennett said she needs to present her values, what she stands for, and deliver a relatable, sympathetic backstory of who she is and where she has come from. That is what the American electorate want to hear from their presidential candidates, and especially so in Harris's case, because most of the country didn't know who she was at that stage. It played out exactly as Matt Bennett said it would, and it was a generally well-received speech. So, Mackin, I'm afraid you may not like it, and it doesn't make for the most substantive campaign filled with debates about policy detail, but it's a pragmatic choice made by US candidates, and it's how politics in America works. The next question is from Sophie, who says, former President Trump and ever more Republicans are coming out against traditional news media, occasionally appearing hostile to journalists. How has that impacted election coverage? And should he win, what issues could you see arising in his second term regarding covering his term effectively? It has been a challenging environment as media covering the Trump campaign. They give preferential treatment to American networks for understandable reasons, as that is how they best reach the US electorate. But they also prefer media who have explicitly pro-Trump or pro-Republican points of view. Networks like Fox News, One American News Network, Newsmax and Right Side Broadcasting News. These are the networks which Donald Trump chooses to give interviews to. They're the ones he's more likely to invite to press conferences or take questions from at media opportunities. So sometimes we have to think laterally on how to include the perspective of Trump in our coverage. We have, for example, recruited former Trump administration officials such as Heather Nauert to appear on our election night program's panel. Heather was the Undersecretary of State and spokesperson at the State Department during Trump's first administration, and she remains in contact with some of Trump's current campaign staff. We will also have former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin throughout our program, and she is someone who remains supportive of Trump and his views. As your question points out, Trump's opposition to mainstream media is well known. That can create a hostile atmosphere when covering some of Trump's events, especially when he or other speakers at his rallies specifically point out where the mainstream media are in the room and criticises them for being fake news and dishonest. The crowd will invariably boo and hurl insults and insulting gestures towards the media. We can reasonably expect that to continue if Trump wins a second term. So there are not only questions of access to Trump, especially for those who are critical of Trump, but there are also questions of security when covering him, which we always factor into our planning and will have to factor again if he wins this time. The next question is from Emily, who asked, how has the development of artificial intelligence impacted reporting of the US election? So, Emily, with the important caveat of, as far as we know, I would say not that much, and not as much as people predicted. We have had a few examples. There was the fake Biden robocall in the state of New Hampshire, the fake Taylor Swift endorsement, which bumped her into her actual Kamala Harris endorsement, and some AI images generated during the recent hurricanes, including a girl holding a puppy on a boat, an image shared and viewed millions of times, including by Republican senators who then deleted the image, but not before it was already forwarded on by others to millions. A Republican National Committee member from Georgia said, and I quote, "I don't know where this photo came from, and honestly, it doesn't matter," with the implication that it expresses how people feel and that the truth doesn't matter. Russian bots created a deep fake of someone claiming to be a former student of Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz, accusing Walz of sexually abusing him when Walz was a high school teacher. It was fake, debunked, but again, not before it was widely disseminated. It's disinformation, more generally, that remains the bigger issue. Generative AI contributes to a sense that people don't know what is and is not true, and the continuing fragmentation of the information space. People enjoy using AI, just as maybe some of you experiment with it, even if it's not for political purposes. It's cheap, it's easy, and entertaining. But it's part of a bigger picture. It has not defined the election, at least not yet and not as far as we know. And we won't know the full impact that it had until the dust settles on this election. I'll leave you with one thought on this question, which is Slovakia is the case that everyone cites. A deep fake was put out the day before voting started, purporting to be an audio recording of the leader of the Liberal opposition, talking about trying to rig the election. And while reporting restrictions were already in place, there wasn't enough time for the media to debunk it. The pro-Russia party won, and Slovakia has withdrawn support for Ukraine, so there are real-world consequences. The next question is from Izzy, who asks, as a journalist, how can you tell between lies and facts that candidates say to each other in debates, and how would the general public check to see if these statements are factual? We've had two presidential debates in this election cycle, and two very different approaches to fact-checking in those debates. In the first debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the CNN moderators didn't do any fact-checking, and both candidates were left to fact-check each other. As is well reported, Biden had a disastrous performance and barely fact-checked anything Trump said, despite the fact that he made numerous false statements. In the second debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, the moderators from ABC News did fact-check, repeatedly challenging and correcting Donald Trump. It helped us to tell the difference between fact and fiction in real time. Most mainstream media did their own work in fact-checking after both debates, but far more people watched the debates than any subsequent fact-checks. So unless you sought out some rigorous, well-sourced analysis after the debates, you would be left none the wiser about what was true and false. So what can you do if you can't rely on either the candidates themselves or the media organisations where the candidates appear? My advice would be to follow a basic principle that I followed throughout my career. Be curious. Interrogate. Scrutinise, and don't take anything at face value, no matter what your political views are or the political views of the person you are assessing. The politician may have an agenda or may just be mistaken, but so long as you're prepared to take the time and you're depending on reputable sources, the most reliable fact checker may be you.
Okay, so hopefully that's has answered some of your questions that weren't specifically asked on there as well. We're going to have a look at what people have been putting on WooClap, and there have been a lot of questions, as you can see there. So a little bit of work for me now. I'm going to pick up some of the ones that specifically relate to journalism and the media. So there's a lot of questions in there that are about the election as a whole, but we'll try and focus on journalism and the elections. Was, I can't see it now, but there was one that was asking I'll ask this Dominic. One of the questions up there is about the challenges that you face when covering elections. What do you think, possibly looking back at the UK election, what was the biggest challenge for you?
Sure. So sort of as obvious as it sounds, elections are incredibly fast-moving. Again, it came as a bit of a surprise, but the election came when it did. So the challenge for our political team was working out who would be sent where, who'd be on the battle bus with Sunak, who'd be out and about with Starmer. One of my colleagues got to spend a whole week following Ed Davey around the country in sort of a load of It's a Knockout style campaign stunts. I think the biggest challenge of all was just to strike that balance of just how much was at stake. And I think while previous elections there had been criticisms that perhaps some of the policy positions had been quite similar, the divide between Labour and the Conservatives, and by definition the Liberal Democrats and Reform on a lot of issues, were really stark, so hammering those home. And again, we didn't see an enormous amount of policy actually going into the election. Labour were very, very keen to talk about particular tax pledges, but not others. The Conservatives sort of hedged their position on the European Convention on Human Rights, again, sort of in an attempt not to divide their own voters too much, as if they'd have said, yes, we'll leave the ECHR. That would have put some people off. It would have attracted maybe other people back from Reform, and then others would use if they'd have made the opposite pledge not to leave the ECHR. So the day challenge was just keeping on top of what was a very fast-moving environment, and we sort of rearranged our usual shift structures, so there were people working earlier than usual, there were people working later than usual, because even by 6, 7 a.m. the campaigns were putting stuff out. We'd have some very early starts on the battle buses, and then again sort of at the other end of the day following up not only the stories that we'd broken that day, but sort of seeing what was in the other newspapers and trying to follow those into our second edition. And then there were obviously events such as the TV debate quite late into the night. So a challenge that we all very much rose to, but just one of flexibility and sort of really hammering out those key dividing lines, because the Labour offer and the Conservative offer were so different at the election.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, we will turn to you. We've got a question here. What are your thoughts on the uses of influencers in political campaigns? Do you think they impact voter opinions in the success of campaigns? I think we talked a little bit earlier. Any thoughts about that specific question?
Yeah, I mean, I think the jury's out, and we'll see. I think more research needs to be done about the use of influencers in the UK election, and it was fairly light touch compared to what's happening in the US. And it's, we'll find out tomorrow night whether the Harris communication strategy has been successful or not. But it seems clear to me that campaigners in political parties around the world are using influencers because our approach has always been to go to the audience. You can reach an audience by paying for it, an audience by being interesting enough to get organic traffic or but there are now outlets that can reach the people you want to reach that are more have a bigger audience, and B, are a more influential audience than the traditional media. I run an organisation called 38 Degrees. We campaign on a whole range of issues. We have 1 million supporters around the country. We're doing a Q&A with our supporters and a cabinet minister soon. And that video of that Q&A with the cabinet minister will go into the inboxes of about 600,000 people, which is more people than read The Guardian and the newspaper put together. That video is coming from an organisation that our supporters have a certain level of trust with. It's a different from the one they have if they read The Guardian or our newspaper. So from our perspective, that's an opportunity for that cabinet minister to hear directly from our supporters about the issues that they care about and to put some pressure onto that cabinet minister. But for that cabinet minister, it's simply a communications approach of trying to get in front of people who you can try and persuade, you can try and explain, and try and get or keep support of. So for us, it's partly about the nature of the messenger that I talked about earlier, and partly about going wherever there is an audience. And I think we're yet to see definitive evidence about how successful that is, but I think you can see that campaigns are now consistently starting to pursue that approach, and you're seeing the end of the singular government communications grid. Campaigners certainly think that it is worthwhile doing.
Thank you. Oksana, there's a question for you. What has been your experience as a woman in a male-dominated field like politics, and I suppose political journalism as well? Has it been different for you as a woman working in what some would class as a man's world traditionally?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I had to deal with this, especially the most difficult times for me was when I was younger and when I was just starting my career, but I was working as a staff correspondent at broadcasting company and editor, news editor, and I was covering lots of electoral campaigns back in Russia, and back then, I started early. I started to work as a staff correspondent of news media when I was 18, and by 20-something, I was already established journalist in the region, and. But of course, it's too young. Now I understand that, but not then. And mainly male-dominated political world. The officials, the parliamentaries, party leaders, and activists. They didn't take me seriously from the beginning. And when they see me, when you are coming for the interview. And the people started to talk to you like you are 5 years old, or I don't know. Just okay, let's just get done with this. And we know you need some kind of interview, But then when I started asking serious questions, challenging them and everything, and only after it took me a while to convince convince this public that to take it was really difficult, I can say, and even later, it's always there's always a chance that people will not take you seriously. It's less here in Europe because of the cultural is more the culture of more tolerance and respect and professional respect. To be honest, I didn't feel any kind of misleading from gender misleading or something like that in conditions here. But if you go to former Soviet Union space, it's very obvious and it's really difficult. So you're struggling with this and you have to be twice strong and twice persuasive than as a man in that area. I guess here in the UK, women are more lucky in that area, in that meaning.
Okay, thank you. Dominic, you talked a little bit about the challenges, but what skills do you think you need to master most? It says here as a journalist, but if we say as a political journalist, what would you say are the main skills that are needed?
Of course, so the first would be attention to detail. A lot of political journalism is around personalities, but the substance of it is around policy. So, one, working out what policies will mean for your readers, what the policies will mean for the wider general, how they contrast between on issues, for example, like the two-child benefit allowance. Labour has changed its stance from manifesto promises and previous Labour leaderships in sort of the last few months. So working out what does that mean. So attention to detail, and then that extends obviously to proofreading copy and tightness of copy as well. And communication is just so important as a political journalist. So often the stories that you'll get, the exclusives that you'll get, will be from having the right conversations with the right people at the right time. So making sure that you work sort of the whole political ecosystem, if you like, building up contacts across all political parties. Obviously, Labour contacts are now so much more relevant for political journalists than they were even a couple of years ago, when many people still doubted that Labour would turn things around in one term. Getting to know sort of the Conservative MPs who are still there just as you listen to this lecture. A new shadow cabinet is being announced, some members of that last shadow cabinet and members of the actual cabinet until July are now on the backbenchers. They will have far less sway, whereas there are some brand new figures who maybe haven't been in the shadow cabinet before being appointed to all these roles. And then, as well as the politicians themselves, getting to know sort of the backbenchers who are going to key rebellions against the government as and when they pop up. And also the politicians, as we call them all pads, their media advisors, who so often will be on the exact same page as their minister. And while you sometimes have to take what pads and spads so they will obviously want to make things as favourable as possible for their minister, they will still have the inside track as to what's going on. So attention to detail, communication, contact building, I think they matter for all, especially matter for political journalists.
Okay, thank you. Another one for Matthew. So, how much do you focus on spinning partisan attacks towards candidates? Models to certain media aligned with your campaign views and ignore others. I suppose this is also to do with how do you respond when your candidate is attacked in general? And are there things that you just ignore and move on, or do you try and respond to those things?
Well, firstly, I resent the implication of spinning. It's outrageous. I mean, I think there's there's two elements to this. In 2012, we were trying to do two things in the rapid response team. The first one is to defend the president against political attacks by McGregor and other actors, and the second is to try and use that day-to-day sparring to drive a broader narrative of Romney. We didn't want to be, we didn't want to operate as a fact-checking team. When you're explaining, you're losing. And so we sought to use the individual moments that happened on a day-to-day basis in a political campaign. Mitt Romney's, made another gaffe. Mitt Romney has, released this policy to drive a long-running narrative about Mitt Romney's unsuitability for office. Too concerned and too out of touch. See, I can still, just trips off the tongue still, 12 years later. And so everything was an attempt to find opportunities to fit around that message, to drive that campaign narrative, particularly in a way that would traditional media coverage, but also provide our supporters with the content that they could share to drive the message themselves in spaces they're in. At the same time, you do need to back down attacks on the president, attacks on which might be persuasive. We spent a lot of time to create content that people could find if they searched for it. Not that we would promote it proactively, send it to journalists. We would just have it on the website. Proactively searching, they could see, for example, that Barack Obama is not a Marxist Muslim born in Kenya, for example, just to pull one example that we had to deal with then. The Biden campaign in 2020 spent a lot of time and money poll testing attacks on Joe Biden to work out which were the audiences they were trying to reach. And they ignored all of the attacks that just weren't persuasive and spent a lot of time making sure that they were at the top of the Google search results for results that were persuasive. So, to answer the question directly, as little as time as you possibly can on defending yourself and as much of the time as you possibly can on trying to turn those attacks or the day-to-day churn of the media into attacks onto your opponent. Or as I prefer to call it, rather than attack, because attack sounds a bit nasty.
Just thinking about that for this election, of course, we had the incident with the Puerto Rico and garbage allegations and then the Trump supporters, and I suppose we saw Trump then arrive with a garbage truck dressed in his high-vis kind of gear, which is a different way of responding to attacks and possibly spinning things.
Yeah, I think the thing is, though, that the political, those kind of gaffe moments, they only really work if they speak to something that voters kind of already deep down believe. And I don't think that the kind of, there is not a pervasive sense that Kamala Harris is someone who views people as scum or garbage, to use Donald Trump's own words about Harris supporters. And so Joe Biden kind of verbally flubbing something, not the first time he's done that this year, in a way that didn't really speak to the moment in the campaign, was kind of, it kind of has flopped a little bit. The comedian at Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden, talking about a huge block of Latino voters in that way, speaks to something that people think Donald Trump basically thinks. He has consistently used racist language about communities of colour. So the idea that he thinks of Puerto Ricans in that way speaks to something that people provides a vehicle for that already believed thing to land home. There was a really interesting focus group over the weekend of a Puerto Rican voter in Pennsylvania. This is a very, very important person in this election, saying that Donald Trump turning up in a garbage truck so soon after his supporters having said Puerto Rico is an island of garbage showed that he really believed that it is an island of garbage. It kind of rebounded on himself. The level of intricacy you need to understand the visual message probably goes beyond quite a lot of voters. So I thought that one was a really, really bad moment for Trump, and I think if he loses, it will be one of 3 or 4 moments in this campaign that people will look to explain why he's fallen short again, because remember, he's lost the popular vote twice in both elections he's run so far. So I think that will be a moment that people will look back to.
Okay, thanks. Oksana, we've got questions, and you touched on it earlier with regard to the Israeli-Palestine conflict. How much do you think these international issues do actually affect elections in general, rather than, and especially possibly looking towards America? Are they looking at things outside of America, or is it more about the economy and immigration and the like?
Well, we can see the kind of the candidates in the elections, both in the UK and both in the US. They kind of have to play two seats at the same time, two roles in the same. On one hand, they have a strong Muslim communities everywhere in Europe and in the US, and here in the UK, dozens of thousands people, hundreds of thousands of people on the street supporting Palestine and calling for ceasefire, calling for peace, calling for stopping the war actions from the Israeli side. And at the same time, there are lots of people within the political system, within the business economical system, who supports Israel in that case. And so they have to politicians have a kind of between, if you say this Sila and Haribda thing, they have to take in account both opinions, and they have to take in account both sides. And for example, for the UK government, there's more open support for plays, kind of maybe Dominic can add something here more than I, but it feels like it plays sometimes against the politics, the politicians, the UK politicians right now. Sometimes because of the big Muslim who supports Palestine. So, and in the US, in the US, this question is obviously one of the, we started with this, one of the main points of the electoral campaigns is this Gaza conflict, this Ukraine conflict, and lots of discourses they are kind of constructed around this question. So basically, even Trump, who considered to be pro-Israeli before, he now have to turn towards Muslim Palestinian side because of the big community of Muslims in the US and because of the elections. So it kind of course, it plays a big role, and plays a big role. The elections will then plays a big role on what would happen within that conflict as well. So it's kind of intermutual connection here.
Okay, thank you. Dominic, did you want to add anything to that?
No, this was very much something that was on show in the 5 constituencies, and out of the 650, so not enormous, but still enough concentrated support to shift the dial on the issue of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And both Sir Keir Starmer and Sunak had come in election, having both at that point called for a ceasefire, having called for a institution. But Palestine and Israel are long split Labour ranks. Sir Keir Starmer did not immediately call for an immediately effective ceasefire following October the 7th atrocities. I think it was February, at which point Starmer called for a full ceasefire. By that point, it was already obvious from that was hurting Labour's Muslim and Asian vote, and ultimately that came to pass. There are now 5 MPs in the Commons elected on pro-Gaza tickets as independent candidates, including Jeremy Corbyn, Sir Keir's predecessor. Both of them take very, very different views on that conflict, and it is the sort of thing that if that conflict were to continue for a few more years or to continue sort of beyond by-elections, we could see more of that. Wes Streeting, for example, the Health Secretary, clung on by just a few hundred votes, ditto Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister. So it wasn't an issue that swung the election in any way, but certainly on a local constituency by constituency level, we're sort of definitely starting to see the rise of that single issue voting.
Okay. We are coming towards the end of our session this afternoon. I've got one last question. Matthew's sort of answered it a little bit already. I'm going to ask all of you. And there's 2 questions. I'm going to ask one of them, which is, who do you think is going to win tomorrow's election? And this doesn't have to be the answer to the other question, which is, who do you want? Who do you think is going to win? Is it going to be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
I am the most uncertain, funnily enough, that I've been entering the campaign, especially after that Iowa poll. My hunch is that Trump will clinch it.
Yeah, if I could if I could make this suggestion, I would better sell the tickets and in the gambling or something, and earn lots of money. Well, we are again at the point where it's the most unpredictable, like exactly it was in 2016, and I hope. Well, my hope is with Kamala Harris, but I see a very strong Trump's campaign, except of some cases, some moments like this Puerto Rican case, and overall he knows how to deliver a simple message. Not exactly a true message, but it's simple enough for people to crowd over this message. And he's an expert in populism, and I see how easy for them to reach the crowd. And I don't know. I don't know. It's unpredictable, but my hopes with Kamala. I hope the common sense will prevail.
Yeah, I mean, nobody. Helpful caveat. I don't have any inside information. I think Harris is finishing incredibly strongly. There are a lot of undecided voters, and her message has been consistent and positive and energetic. And Trump is really struggling in these last few days. He looks incredibly tired. His rallies are much more lackluster than they were in 2016 or 2020. Nobody knows, but I think they're going to win 292 electoral votes. I think she's going to win the popular vote again by around 4 million. I do think the number of votes that will separate the two candidates in the swing is relatively low in the 10%, and Donald Trump will use that closeness to try and use election clerks and the courts to steal the election in the same way he did in 2020. So I think Harris is going to win, but buckle up.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to the 3 of you for your insights. It's been really